Solange Moujan joins me on the set for today's press review. Hi, Solange.
Hi, Jeannie.
Lots of focus, of course, on the escalating crisis in Ukraine.
Yeah, and let's begin with the Russian press. It is widely discussing Vladimir Putin's 40-minute speech last night and his Security Council unanimously deciding that the Donetsk and Luhansk regions, territories, should be independent. Now, the Russian paper Kommersant is very clear about the final decision. The paper says, in the end, Vladimir Putin decided everything. It was his decision alone. Meanwhile, in the Ukrainian press, the paper De Kiev, it writes that Moscow's tactics are clear, but, quote, the raising of the bar, the paper says, is not a declaration of war, but a continuation of it, for war was declared 8 years ago already, the paper says. Now, Courrier International has a mashup of other Ukrainian media, and they are saying that the speech was very much a declaration of war for them.
What are the papers saying about any hope of diplomacy at this point?
Well, as we can see with an article in Libération entitled, Is this a final blow for diplomatic efforts, especially in light of the fact that a Biden-Putin summit that Macron organized was on the table just yesterday? It wonders what's going to happen to diplomacy. Now, for the conservative paper Le Figaro, Macron's diplomatic efforts, quote, did not pay off and were reduced to nothing by a Russia that, quote, was just not interested. And for the Swiss paper Le Temps, diplomatic efforts will continue, but the Americans no longer really believe a summit will happen after, quote, Moscow's cold shower.
Now, for many papers, Vladimir Putin's intentions seem to be very, very clear at this point.
Yeah, The Guardian has a really excellent article today where it asks, is it still possible to avoid a major war in Europe? While it doesn't answer the question per se, it does say, quote, Russia is already has a noose around Ukraine's neck, end quote, and that whatever happens, Europe is facing existential questions about, quote, whether it is prepared to marshal hard power to defend its own liberal order, end quote. Now, for the Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung, the answer is very clear. The time for illusions is over. It's time for Europe to immediately use dissuasive measures, even potentially nuclear ones, it says.
What are the papers saying about what all of this means for NATO?
Well, a former NATO commander and former U.S. General Wesley Clark says in USA Today that it is time to, quote, stop the frantic rush to engage Moscow, that instead NATO and U.S. troop presence need to be built up in Europe. And in the New York Times, Friedman argues that the U.S. is, quote, not an innocent bystander here. He argues that it has fueled Putin's fire by expanding NATO in the 1990s. And for Friedman, the other major log in the fire that is Putin's failure of leadership to hide Russia's economic woes. The Times writes that Putin is, quote, dining out nightly on his image as a wartime president.
Now, the Washington Post has a quite scary view of what Vladimir Putin's plans might be.
Yeah, the Washington Post is looking to the future, and it is asking a number of what-ifs. It imagines the very possible scenario where Moscow takes Ukraine. Then there would be a new front line of conflict with an immediate threat to the Baltic states, which leads the paper to question, quote, whether NATO could really defend its members, end quote. Now, to add to this bit of geopolitical, for now, fiction, the Post says this shifting of strategic balances, and another one that could occur simultaneously with China and Taiwan. Well, this could be reminiscent of Japan and Germany in the 1930s. World War II hypotheses aside, the Post is nonetheless very clear in its editorial board opinion. It argues, quote, this is the way the post-war world ends.
Solange, you found some cartoons on Ukraine as well.
Yeah, the illustrator Clay Bennett has a simple but telling cartoon for the Chattanooga Times where the hand of a thief is breaking the lock on the door of Ukraine. And my favorite today is by Michael Ramirez of the Las Vegas Review-Journal. In his cartoon, he has a soldier in a Russian tank repeating, I'm not touching you, I'm not touching you, while the tank's gun pokes over the border and butts up against a Ukraine granny.
All right, even the cartoon cartoons today are a little bit worrisome, but you actually found something on the lighter side to leave us.
Yeah, I couldn't leave us with fears of war, so I found another reason to remember today. If you haven't noticed already, today's date is a special one. It's a palindrome. As the front page of Libération shows us, it's the 22nd day of the second month of 2022, and Libé has dedicated, with its great graphics and articles, an entire issue to the number 2. That is, except for its coverage for Ukraine. That was not under the 2022. And the Washington Post, too, is also raising our spirits about this Tuesday, or Tuesday, TWO's Day. It writes that in addition to number geeks setting their clocks for 10:22 tonight, others are heading in large number to the altar. A Las Vegas clerk says there are 9 times more marriages scheduled today to celebrate the special date.
Right, and 10:22, of course, in military time,
Exactly.
22:02. It took me a long time to live in France to understand that.
Yes.
Solange, thank you very much for that look at today's press review.